Welcome everybody. So as we are kicking off, we're just going to wait another couple of minutes to see if we can have some more of your lovely people joining us for the call, this conference this afternoon. I'll first by introducing myself. My name is Tom Camilleri. I will be looking after the call, kind of hosting you guys this afternoon. I'm basically the CEO of GSA, along with an organization called True Education Partnerships, which I'm sure you'll learn a little bit more about in the not too distant future. Our primary goal for today is essentially, this is the very first virtual conference that we've run in the Global School Alliance. The Global School Alliance, GSA for short, has, we only really launched it, I would say, mid-May, and it came from off the back end of the work that we've been doing in international partnerships for the past 6 years between the UK and China. We've established, it's coming up to about just over 200 school partnerships, so 400 in total between the UK and China, running heads delegations, teacher exchanges, student exchanges, joint projects, that sort of thing. And the inspiration behind the Global School Alliance is all of that great stuff that we were doing between the UK and China. I do believe that it's now a good time to kind of open that up to the rest of the world. So although we are very much early days, the kind of aspiration for what the GSA could become is, I'm sure many of you will be familiar with the British Council's e-twinning. We're looking to essentially develop the GSA into the global version of e-twinning. So as I say, we've only been really at this in its current form for the past 4 weeks or a month now. So the kind of immediate to medium term plan is we're going to be running these conferences on a regular basis. And the sort of ethos behind how and why we're doing it is really, we see ourselves as the kind of facilitators, being able to create a platform for you guys to really be able to connect with one another, but also to share your personal and professional experiences on the front line in all of your different educational settings, but also all of your different countries. So I am super stoked to get this thing started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to share my screen with everybody. So there we go. Let me just drop this out. So again, just before we get started, would love to do a bit of housekeeping. So for those of you who are familiar with Zoom, there are a number of different functions that we are able to use. Let me just get myself sorted. So as we are going through, one of the key elements that I'd love you all to be aware of is that we will be hearing from 4 great educators very shortly. We will be following up the presentations with a Q&A. So as some of you have already spotted, we have the Zoom group chat, which you can find on, obviously if you've used it before, you should be able to find it, but it's basically on this kind of toolbar that you'll be able to see. If you can't see it, drop down for more into chats. If you would, all the questions that you have, if you could literally just write them down into the group chat. Once we've finished with the presentations, lucky Southampton. Once we are done with the presentations, then I will basically, I'll do a quick run through the common themes and threads that I pick up on. I would love to come back to those who have asked the question. We will unmute you, give you the mic, and then if you would, again, just fire away with your feedback, your suggestions, or in fact your questions for our speakers, that would be most appreciated. So actually, just before we jump in, again, we spent a lot of time with schools throughout the UK and schools throughout China. This is, again, a really exciting project for ourselves to be able to kind of open up to the wider world. So the fact that we have, let's see what we've got. We have Pauline from the Isle of Wight. We have Megan from the United States. We have, actually, no, I'm just going to call the countries that way. So we have Moldova represented, York, UK. Pretty sure that's, we can count that as UK. Southampton, Malaysia, Serbia, Guangzhou, China, fantastic. Ohio, US, Netherlands, amazing, and some more from China. Super excited to have everybody online. So again, just to give you a little bit more of an introduction to what let me just drop that off, what the agenda will be. So we're going to be starting with a Dr. Paul Heary, head teacher at Bronco College. Then we'll be moving on to Malin, then Abby, and then Darren. We're going to look to have about 10 to 15 minutes to go through the presentations. So again, a little bit more around the Global Alliance in about 3 minutes. Paul, if you're ready to roll, then we'll hand it over to yourself. So again, as I was saying, I'm going to put some more people on here. It's weird talking to a computer screen. There we go, actual people. So again, the Global School Alliance, as you've seen, we basically have two major kind of memberships that are currently available. The ambassadors and the memberships. And the thought process behind that is, again, the ambassadors are yourselves, they're the people, and the memberships are the organizations and institutions that you work within. This might not be so relevant today, but we do have a load of exciting opportunities that we're looking to open up over the next 3, 6, 12 months, which will be not only for yourselves as ambassadors, but also for your schools. So what we would love to see happen is, as an ambassador, you can get involved, we can connect you with the rest of the community. If you then see, take interest in, maybe if we were to go out with an opportunity to actually visit one of your awesome GSA member schools in sunny Serbia, then again, that'd be something that we'd love to be able to talk to yourselves and your schools about. Again, really the goals of the GSA is really about connecting schools and school communities around the world. As I say, we have only recently launched, so the website, let's see if I can dig that out. So, Global Alliance. So as you see, if we go to the website, it's still early days, and you basically have your access to the conference registrations, with the sign up, but also this element here with the blog, which if you guys want to keep your eyes on, this is where we're going to be basically sharing things that we're learning along the way, resources, opportunities to kind of connect. And this is where we would love, again, we're going to be going out to you guys as ambassadors to really shine a light on the great work that you guys are doing. So this will kind of become what we hope a home for sharing best practice, a home for you guys to go and look potentially for inspiration. One of the great things that bring everybody together will do is that we all have our own individual environments that we operate within, but some of the problems that we encounter ourselves they're not just individual to us. There are more than likely going to be other people out in the community that have come across and probably found great solutions for issues that you might come across. So hopefully we're going to be able to build this section of the site into a real kind of bank of resources that is essentially owned, created, and shared by yourselves. One really exciting addition that we are going to be adding in the not too distant future is what we are calling at the minute our Learning Unleashed platform. Now, within Learning Unleashed, there will be two major elements. One is communications function. It will be robust and simple to use to begin with. And essentially the idea behind it will be that we are we'll be able to facilitate communications between schools, between ambassadors, and between students. So again, in the other organization that we run in True Education Partnerships within a sister school, what we're able to do is essentially build relationships between students and classrooms. And the best way to do that obviously is in person, but as we know at the minute, things are slightly different. So having that online ability to develop relationships, to learn from one another, we're really going to be opening that up for the GSA community. So if you guys, for example, if you got some inspiration from what Malin is going to share with us from Sweden, we'd be able to help you set up a call, and actually basically get, a one-to-one or one-to-many opportunity for you guys to chat. And hopefully before long, what I'd love to be able to see is, kids from around the world with different backgrounds, different cultures, different sorts of perspective on life, being able to, first connect online, and hopefully at one point in time be able to really connect and build relationships in a face-to-face manner. Second part of that is that the Learning Unleashed platform will really be another technology that we'll be able to use to capture all of the great work that you guys are doing, and then make it again available on an ongoing basis within the Alliance. So, being able to go and work with schools around the world, capturing what's going on in the classroom, what's going on within training sessions, how kids are reacting to certain ways of being taught, building that into an ecosystem that we can really make it as accessible as possible for, somebody in Southampton to learn from how Shanghai maths is going on in Pudong district. For me, and hopefully for a lot of you on the call, that actually would be a pretty exciting thing to get off the ground. So there is a lot in the pipeline, but to start with, we are really going to focus on our virtual conferences. Our aspiration at the minute is we're going to have at least one of these calls every month. What I'd love to see happen, however, is to probably get up to about 2 a month. The themes and the topics that are actually selected, I'd love to be able to go out to you guys as the ambassadors to find out what is important, what is of interest, what things you really would like to kind of discuss and talk about. And we'll basically go out and kind of make that happen. The other side to it is, again, the last little bit of housekeeping is we are recording the call today. And so once we've finished, you guys will expect to see a copy of it emailed out to the email that you have signed up with. And as we go on and as we go through, those who aren't able to make the call, they will also get a copy. So again, the recordings of these calls will then we'll start to build a almost like a video library on the website. So if there's anything that is covered in one of these conferences that you thought, actually, do you know what, that'd be really useful, and you might not remember, exactly all the detail, you can always go back to it. And the other awesome thing is, Paul might share something like, do you know what, that would be really cool. See if I can kind of put that in place. I could do with catching up with Paul. I could do with, maybe picking his brains, asking him a couple of questions. And we'll be able to build that online library. And again, within the community, that ability to reach out and be like, do you remember that, that combined curriculum that you put together, or how you really, how you pulled that, how you run the bubble within your classroom, being able to ask, really detailed and specific questions start to become reality. So we're going to start with Paul. We have 4 presenters that we'll go through. I will be joining you guys again after Darren has completed his presentation. If you guys want to ask, get your questions down in the group chat, that would be awesome. If you would like to ask any questions to ourselves, then we have Tony, we have Jackie, and we have Adele online. So if, again, in the group chat, let's see if I can actually show you this little drop down menu here. Tony, Jackie, and Adele, who is actually on True Partnerships. You can just fire them a message if you need any help. Otherwise, if you could just chuck it into everybody for your question later, I will be back to pick them up later. Cool. So Paul, I would love to now stop sharing and hand it over to you.
Okay, give me 1 second. Now, I'm assuming that you can now see the PowerPoint on my screen.
Yes, indeed.
That's great. Okay, thank you very much, Tom, and very good afternoon to everyone. Good afternoon from the UK anyway. I'm not sure what time it is where everyone else is watching. Tom said it's the first of these conferences, and as the first speaker of the first of these conferences, it's a great honour and a little bit of pressure, but hopefully that won't put me off my stride too much. I've done so many Zoom meetings. I thought that I've exhausted every possible way of unintentionally sabotaging a Zoom meeting through technology, but I seem to come up with new ones all the time. So if I do, I apologise, and I'll try and get back on track as quickly as possible. I'd also like to echo what Tom's been saying about the importance and the benefit of sharing ideas and experiences in this way. And I find that every interaction I have with a colleague, I bring something from, I learn something. And so it's a really great opportunity, and I'm very, very happy to connect with people outside of this meeting as well, and through the various platforms that Tom's described there. So let me just see if I can, there we are. So White Hills Park Trust, by the way, all these slides I know will be available to you, so there are some links and that you can click on if you want to at a later time, but also I won't be reading through them. I'll just be kind of summarising. There's I think only one slide which I'm going to go through point by point. But the White Hills Park Trust is a very small multi-academy trust. For those outside the UK system, that's a small group of schools that effectively take responsibility for the management of those schools. We're 2 secondary schools and soon to be joined by 3 primary schools. And our schools are successful, local, comprehensive schools. They reflect in lots of ways the makeup of our city, of the city of Nottingham, and also of the UK in terms of the balance of students who come to the schools. It's not really an Ofsted word, but I would describe our schools as lovely schools with fantastic students and a really great group of staff, and a great place to work. I've been in the school in our trust now for about 7 years, just under 7 years. I've actually started teaching in 1988, so I'm just about to complete my 32nd year of teaching. I don't know if anyone can beat that in the room, but but certainly not by very much, I wouldn't imagine. And I've been a head teacher or a CEO since 1997. And what I think is quite unique about my own personal experience is that I've been head teacher of primary school, that's age 3 to 11 for those outside the UK, of middle schools, it should be age 9 to 13, and now secondary from 11 to 18. I think that's unique mostly because I don't think anyone else has tried to do that, but it does mean that it gives me a different perspective, I think, and a different insight, I think, particularly in terms of the way we work across the system. What I've found, as I've said before, is that I'm always learning, always interested in learning, and always continuing to learn. And experiences like this, I think, are a big part of that. So our experience through this COVID crisis as the trust, and I'm going to particularly focus on the 2 secondary schools that within our existing trust, I think is probably fairly similar to most of the schools in the UK, in that we've stayed open for all the way through for students who are children of key workers or are vulnerable students. Started with low numbers and built up. We're now opening more widely, and we're starting to plan for September. And I think for me, the whole experience is divided into those 3 phases. The initial phase, which was the first 2 or 3 weeks after closure was announced, the second phase, which we're in now, and then looking ahead to the 3rd phase. So the challenges when we had that initial closure, I think were like nothing I've experienced. And you know, so 32 years in teaching, you think that you've seen it all. You think that you've kind of come across everything, and then this has thrown challenges that we've never had before. And I think that what in those first 2 weeks, we had the announcement, I think on a Wednesday evening, that we'll be closed from the Monday. And And there were a huge number of challenges that were all urgent, all had to be dealt with immediately. They were all really, really vital. None of them, if we'd have left any of them, it could have been really, really damaging and destructive. They were all incredibly complex to try and work these out. And they all made massive demands on our capacity. So we had to deal with all of those. And I would say that those 2 or 3 weeks were probably the most challenging time that and pressure time that I've spent in education. And we also had a particular challenge in that we had to manage in that time, in those first 2 weeks, 2 bereavements, one of a member of staff, part-time member of staff, and one of a student, neither from coronavirus, but both with some links to the crisis, and a particular difficulty in the fact that we couldn't have to do those things that you would normally do, gather your community around you, have that face-to-face support because of everything that was happening. But we had so many things that we had to deal with urgently. We had to make sure that our children and their families had access to food. We were the people who they turned to when they needed that access, when it wasn't available. We had to make sure that our students were safe. We had to think about the mental health of students and staff, and we had to think about how we were opening to small numbers of pupils. And it was, I think, if I'm being honest, it was slightly overwhelming. And I don't think I'm unique in that. The sharing with other heads and other teachers, I think a lot of people found the same in that initial phase. What we did, if I had to pick out one strategy, it was communication. So what we did was talk to people all the time, open up those lines of communication. From day one, I normally write an email to all staff on a Friday, brought that into a daily email, asked people if there's things they wanted to communicate, come via that email. We talk to parents regularly through emails, through the platform that we use to send messages, but also through newsletters. We have a weekly newsletter. We've continued that all the way through. We had lots of virtual staff meetings, virtual parents forums and so on. And so our first strategy was to make sure that we knew what was happening and we were communicating with people all the time. We then had to get our curriculum offer in place. And what we did at first, I think, is we put that in place without too much regard in that initial phase for the quality of that curriculum. We needed to make sure that students could access that there were materials for them, that we were supporting people who were not sure what to do without really going into too much detail about planning, about how that fitted in with the scheme of work and so on. At that point, we had no idea how long this was likely to last for. And in that time, we were trying to maintain the community, build our IT capacity, and in particular, make sure that our safeguarding procedures were in place. It was very easy. There was a temptation to do things that we wouldn't have done in normal times. Because of the urgency that would have meant that our students potentially weren't safe, in particular how we delivered live lessons and so on. So they were our priorities, and that took us through those first few weeks until we came to the next stage. And I think it's fair to say things calmed down a little bit as we came out of the Easter holidays, and we managed to get control of that situation. The Easter holidays came at the right time. We didn't stop working at those. We didn't stop admitting students during the Easter holidays, but it meant that we could take a bit of a breath and start to get things in place. Think about the quality of the curriculum, think about the next steps. It was always clear that there would be an element of reopening. For those people who aren't from the UK, it was very, very unclear what that was going to look like. We had to plan for a number of different eventualities, not knowing which of those was the one that was going to be the one that we were faced with. So the strategies as we went into this time, we needed to build the model of remote learning. We couldn't afford to lose a full term of learning. We've subsequently found out that our year 7, year 8 and year 9, so that's a significant proportion, probably about half of the students that we have are not coming in at all during this term, except found out 2 days ago that they can come in for one meeting, but substantially not coming in. So we needed to make sure that that curriculum, those students, some of them are only 11 and 12 and 13 years old, not all of them will be motivated, and not all of their families will be able to make sure that they can learn. Not all of them will have the access to learning materials and to the internet and so on. There may be, we checked there was a internet access in every house, and there was if you like, a laptop. We provided lots of laptops and so on, but there may only be one, and there might be three children and a parent working from home. So we had to put things in place there. We've then started to build the safety ready for reopening. We've had some students in to build that more. And I have a view that head teachers by instinct are kind of risk takers, because we have to innovate and we have to deal with things as they come to us. We've had to curb that. I think we've had to curb that instinct. I'm fortunate I've got people in our organisation whose job it is to curb that instinct in me. So we have people, you know, our HR team being fantastic, our head of property, to go through risk assessments. Risk assessments I've always considered to be something that you couldn't get a duller half an hour than going through a risk assessment. But sometimes things can be dull but very, very important. And at this point, they've been very, very important. We've had to liaise with unions, and we had to talk to our staff to reassure them. We had to think about some of the issues that we've had around BAME staff, around staff with particular vulnerabilities or family issues, or even their own mental health conditions. And actually, I put an acronym there, apologies, but MHAW stands for Mental Health Awareness Week, which happened during May, and we did a lot of focus on. We did a daily session for staff to give them opportunities to talk, and support, to give them some support materials. The link there is a link to our website where all those materials, the daily email that we sent out about that. But we wanted to make sure our staff were supported in their mental health, and also to be able to support students and others as well. So we've had a lot to do, and I think we've managed to do that well, but it's all unsatisfactory. It's not a model for going forward. So we've managed to make the best of that. I think we've managed to get things in place and keep people safe, but it's not how we can continue to work. And I think we all recognise that. So we're now thinking longer term and actively considering. This is really a big part of my role, to actively and support the schools in considering what happens next. The first thing we know is that there are some things that we have to do, and that's around making sure that we plan for. No one is expecting. I think we're expecting and hoping that we'll have far more students in the new year, but no one is expecting that will look exactly the same. So we need to plan to make sure our schools are safe, or are set up, that we've got to build timetables. And if anyone listening is involved in setting secondary timetables, you'll know what a nightmare that is. We're trying to build different models that can be collapsed, that can be part-time, moved to part-time, and so on. So some of those things are things that we have to do. And some of them are things that we want to do. And we want to use the opportunities, particularly around curriculum, the opportunities of things that we've learned over this period, to enhance the kind of blended approach to learning at home. And if we can deliver learning in school to the level that we were doing before, and enhance that by delivering remote learning much more effectively, then that should make a big difference. So that's what we're looking at, thinking about those sorts of things. I'm really resistant to the idea of catch-up. I think that implies that we will deliver a narrow version of the curriculum to just kind of make up lost ground by cramming things in. I think good teaching and learning, you start where the pupils are. And given the fact that there will be differences, but all students will have been affected by this, we start where they are and we deliver the best curriculum possible from that point, rather than some kind of perceived idea of where they should have been if we hadn't have had this, and cramming things in to make that difference. So we're thinking about those, thinking about how we can continue to deliver music and PE and technology, given some of the restrictions that we might have. And the things, just to kind of wrap it up, and I'd like to kind of talk through each of these really very briefly. But the things that we've learned, or the things certainly that I shouldn't speak for others, that I've learned so far. First of all, a really positive thing is how central school is to the life of our communities. Through this kind of testing period, we are closer. We've always had a close relationship with our parents, I believe, and a good relationship. We're closer now than I think we've ever been, that we've really come together, and we've explained what we're doing and why we're doing it, and we've had huge support from parents. And when parents have had problems, when they haven't been able to put food on the table, not just for their children who we have, but for the whole family, they've often turned to us. So that's been really important and heartwarming, I think. We've learned that there are more efficient ways of doing some of the things we do. I'm a kind of, I have a love-hate relationship with platforms like Zoom, but I can certainly see the potential, and the number of times that we have dragged people from school to school for half-hour meetings, that we now think we could do this much more efficiently. The ways, I think, particularly with I think of our sixth form students, and the ways that we can enhance their learning through a kind of blended approach. So we want to do, we've learned that there are more efficient, more effective ways of doing things. We've learned that our school community, our staff, in particular, are united and are robust, and and have appreciated, I think, what we've done. We did just last week, we did a staff stress survey, a confidential survey, to find out what people are thinking, and we've had some really positive outcomes from that. That whilst we're never going to get everything right, they recognise that we're trying to do the right thing. We also, I think, I'm delighted there's no Progress 8 this year. I'm sad there's no exams, but I'm delighted there's no Progress 8 this year. I'm delighted that schools aren't pitted against each other at this point, because actually what we've found is when the crisis comes, we're all working together. And the idea that we would do something that, if you like, that would reflect on us at the expense of another school would seem bizarre and indefensible. So if it's bizarre and indefensible at the moment, then it should be at the same time. So we've worked really closely with a wider group of schools, and particularly at that first time, that was where we got a lot of the support. I've certainly learned that one of the key skills that we have is being able to adapt swiftly to change. And one way that we did that was by giving autonomy to people who need to make those decisions. So collapsing our structures, if you like, and we rewrote our schema delegation. Won't be of any interest to most people, but to basically say schools don't need to come to the trust to get permission to do things. If you need to close the school or make those decisions, you make those decisions. Our role is to support you in that. Our role is to make sure that what you're doing is safe, to monitor the safety of it. But you make the decisions about the provision, about the practice, and that way we can be nimble and adapt to change really well. We don't have to go through complicated structures, and we'll support you in those decisions. And then the final thing that I've learned without any doubt is that there's always new things to learn. You can never rest on your laurels and think we've got this cracked. There's always new things to cope with, and I think that's a valuable thing. It's a kind of humbling thing, but it's a valuable thing, and as educators, it's something that we should probably instinctively know. So now.
Wow, Paul, that was exactly 15 minutes. Very well done. Very well done. But the timer on my phone is about to ring. That was expertly done. Thank you so much.
Many years of assemblies, Tom.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. Again, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. If you do have anything, even if it's suggestions or comments or questions that you'd like to ask Paul, please go ahead and chuck them in the group chats. We are going to now move on to Malin. So if you would like to take the screen, we'll hand over to you. Thanks so much.
Okay. Can you see me? Okay. Hi, everyone. I was asked to come here and tell you about my experiences during the COVID-19 outbreak in a Swedish school. So this presentation will be based on my experiences and my opinions. And I'm sure there are other teachers in Sweden who doesn't feel the same way, but this is my story. Okay, so who I am, my name is Malin Bliss. I'm a teacher at a secondary school in Eskilstuna, which is a town near Stockholm. We have about 100,000 inhabitants. I teach Spanish and English, and I teach pupils from age 12 to 16. And we are almost 400 students in our school, and more or less 40% in the staff. Okay. So the outbreak in Sweden, it started in after week 8 and 9, because that's when we have the winter break in Sweden, and a lot of people go skiing in Italy and Austria. So when they came home, the virus started spreading, mostly around the area of Stockholm. And in the beginning, it was a very confusing time for all of us, because we got a lot of new information every day, and we had to be very flexible, and we had to be prepared to change the way we worked every day. And we were prepared to close down. We waited for that decision to come every day because all the countries around us closed their schools. So we thought it was just a matter of time before Sweden would close down too, but this information never came. So we kept on as normal, almost. And in the beginning, a lot of students chose to stay home due to the risk of getting the virus. I think some of them also took the chance to get a few days off school. And in the beginning, some teachers had symptoms too, and they stayed home. So we had to change our organization from day to day. But I think in about 6 weeks' time, things were back to almost normal, at least when it comes to the amount of students being in school and staff working. And well, in my own personal opinion, it was the right way to go, because it was a very confusing and scary time for all of us and for the children. And I think it's good to have a normal day and a normality to come to. So keeping the schools open was good, I think. And the recommendations from the Swedish government were, it says here that it wasn't a political decision, but of course it is, because the politicians are the ones who decide in Sweden. But they have a very close cooperation with the experts and the authority on healthcare, and they give them their opinion and expertise on how to handle the pandemic. So the politicians follow their recommendations. And the recommendations were to close down all the upper secondary schools and the university, but not schools with pupils younger than that. And the main reason was that parents needed to go to work, especially those who work in hospitals and with healthcare. So if we would have kept the children home, then the parents would have needed to stay at home too. So that's the main reason why they kept open, I think. And we have this, I will see if I can open this. I think that you are all familiar to this, but it's put up everywhere around our school and other places too, so that we won't forget to wash our hands frequently, cough and sneeze into your elbow, avoid touching your eyes, nose and mouth, and stay at home when you feel unwell. Oops, where is my presentation now?
We can still see the screen share from our side, Malin.
You can?
Yep.
Oh, well, I cannot.
Okay, so I think you at the minute you've also just stopped sharing your vid.
Oh, maybe there. There it is. Here we go. It's okay?
Yes, we can see other concerns.
Yeah, good.
Perfect.
Yes. So the recommendations were based on everyone taking their own responsibility. So it's not really, they don't tell us what to do, but we need to, everyone in Sweden has to take their responsibility to not spread the virus. And the main focus has been to keep our elderly away from the virus. So we try to help them with grocery shopping so they can stay at home, and help them with other things they need. And we avoid contact with them. Every school has to do what they can to prevent the virus from spreading. And we had an upper secondary school. We have an upper secondary school just next to us. So since they were closed, we could use their buildings, which was good, because then we could spread out the pupils and the staff too. So we had 3 groups of students in 3 different buildings, and the classes stayed in their classrooms, and the teachers moved around to them to not mix the students too much. And we also have staff rooms in different buildings. And not every school had the chance to do this, but we had, so we could, which was good for us. And this is a picture of 3 of my colleagues in our staff room, and we try to keep social distance and not to sit too close to each other. And if someone in the staff is in the risk group, he or she can work from home. And we've cancelled almost all our staff meetings. So we meet in small groups if we have to, or we use social medias or email or maybe Google Meet to communicate. And this is a photo from our lunchroom where we put up tape on the floor to remind ourselves to the distance that we need to keep. It was hard to do something about the classrooms, and they look mainly the same since young people have shown not to be that severely and easily infected, and since we were not able to manage the classroom situation in another way. So we have classrooms with 25 to 30 pupils, so it's a bit crowded, but well, we couldn't do it in another way. And all the students are guaranteed their education, so we must make sure that they are able to follow our courses even if they are home and if they're not in school. And in the beginning, when many students were at home, we handed them links, tasks, and sometimes some teachers had lessons via Google Meet. So we had kind of a remote learning in the classroom for a while to make sure that everyone was able to keep up with the subjects. And every student in Sweden from the age of 10, I think, they have their own laptop provided by the municipality. So that was good. It made it easier with the online education. And now we are back to normal. Almost all the students, well, the students are back and the teachers too. So we still, at the end of this term, we still had the different buildings, but the classes looked the same and the teachers were back as well. So how we feel about this? Healthy and young teachers are usually not afraid, and I count myself as young, being 41, but we are not that afraid. We have one teacher at our school who teaches from home because she has an underlying illness. Otherwise, we are at our workplace. And some students and their parents were afraid in the beginning, and parents kept their children at home. But we tried to get them back to school because, and the principal had meetings with parents and students since the restrictions from the government were that all healthy children and staff should be in school. However, we of course, we respected their fear and we never forced someone to get back. And maybe they had relatives at home with underlying illnesses, and then we respected that, so they could stay at home. And I know that in other school in my town, they had a lot of more students missing or staying at home. But eventually students came back to us and they haven't fallen ill. And when we get back, when we get home from work, we avoid meeting large groups of people, and especially our older relatives. and friends. And I think we have learned a lot during this time. We've been forced to use new technical solutions. We've been forced to think in another way, of how we teach and also how we have meetings. I think it's something we can use in the future to make it a lot more efficient. But it's been, of course, it's been a very stressful time for all of us due to a lot of changes in the organization all the time, and that we had to be prepared to change all the time. So it gave us a feeling of being in a state of uncertainty. But I think we have managed the situation well, but we are very much looking forward to the day when everything is back to normal again. Okay.
Very good. Thank you so much, Marlon. I'm not sure if you guys have had a minute to write in the group chat some questions, but I know I have plenty that I'd like to ask you later on. I find it really interesting to see, obviously Paul made a comment around schools being the center of communities. I'd be really interested, and I'll ask you later, around what the general consensus of those communities, like what the parents and the wider populace of Sweden really, how do they react to the national policy and the rest of it. But I'll save that for later, give you a minute to think about it. And we will move on now to Abby. So if you want, there we go. Abby, if you'd like to start sharing your screen.
That worked?
There we are, perfect. And over to you.
So everyone, I'm Abby Miles and I'm a lead PE teacher and coordinator at Perry Courtyards Academy. It is a primary school in the UK based in Bristol. So I teach the whole school the PE curriculum, and a few changes going on at the moment due to the current situation, because current guidelines state that in the UK I can't be delivering PE to every single year group and every single bubble, because you can't be crossing across the student with the students. Not sure if that is the same guidelines everywhere else in the world, but there's a few guidelines that I'm going to go through with you today to explain how to deliver safe PE lessons with your staff as well as your students. So the current expectations are for your children still to get access to physical education. So in the UK, it states as a guideline that children do get up to 2 hours a week. I'm not sure what the other guidelines are worldwide. However, I would probably recommend that your children are accessing at least 1 hour at the moment, depending on how they're staggering and what days they're coming in. I know that at the moment we have 2 days given for year 6 and 2 days for year 1. So I would probably recommend about at least the 1 hour, because as important as physical education is, they still need to be making sure that getting access to the other curriculum in detail that they've not had yet the full access to at home. Some teachers who may not be confident in PE may be expected to deliver PE lessons. So what we've done at our academy at the moment, I provided a PE pack for our staff to follow to deliver. So we're still following the national curriculum. So usually we'd be teaching athletics in this term, or preparing for our sports days and maybe some tennis sports. So we've created some guidelines. So athletic sessions, so sprinting, hurdles, which is less contact with sports for our teachers to follow. So planning should still be following national curriculum requirements. So I think a lot of schools have planned PE lessons, maybe some more little basic activities at the moment. So just games based, but it's really important that they're still getting access to that general learning and curriculum. So still following their fundamental skills, so knowing what their running is, their jumping is, what their throwing and catching is, obviously still knowing that they have their own equipment. So to incorporate the government guidelines to ensure pupils are at least 2 meters apart from each other. I did see that Malin said 1.5 meters earlier on, so I'm not sure if Sweden have different distant guidelines, but in the UK we have 2 meters at the moment. Encourage your lessons to take part outside to avoid any external contact inside, because if you do have students going in and out of sports hall, it will require a deep clean in between lessons. So your lessons should be planned strictly to avoid contact lessons. So things like football, where they're going to tackle each other, tag rugby or rugby where they're passing the ball to each other, that needs to be avoided because they are strictly having contact with that equipment, and children shouldn't be sharing equipment at this time. When you're timetabling PE lessons, try and consider your students coming in their PE kit for that day. So they have to avoid going to certain areas to change, and they're already in and ready to go. So that avoids minimising any changing issues. And you need to know exactly what will be used during your lesson. So when it comes to cleaning, you'll know what needs cleaning. And again, to make sure there's clear signage, maybe even outside for the NHS guidelines that we have in the UK and your government guidelines, make sure that is visible. So equipment, it needs to be minimal equipment if possible, otherwise you're making the job for yourself a little bit more hard because you're going to have to then clean it all. Lock-away kit and equipment that is tempted to be grabbed. I know last summer I left my PE cupboard unlocked and some students went in at lunchtime and helped themselves to some balls. So make sure that if you do have an outdoor PE cupboard, it is locked up to avoid them being tempted. Something to try and include is a PE pencil case. So maybe having a bag of equipment for your children to have and say, this is yours, and they aren't to share it throughout the lesson. So if you do want to focus on throwing, they have their own piece of equipment and it's not going from one person to another. They're throwing it, they're retrieving it, and they're keeping that equipment to themselves. When you're instructing your pupils regarding equipment, it needs to be clear. So any equipment that requires handling by the pupils will need sanitising afterwards. They need to know this. And when cleaning it, make sure, I would suggest you wear gloves, because if you're cleaning it yourselves and you're then picking it up and touching it, you then just got to remember, oh, this child's just had this in their hands. So I suggest you wear some gloves and choose your equipment wisely. The more, what I'm trying to say, the more creative in your lessons you go and wild of equipment, then the more clean the process is going to have to be. So during the lesson, children, we encourage in our school children to work in zone areas, which should be marked out by cones or could be marked out by chalk, so that they have their own designated area. And then make sure the whole lesson adheres to the social distancing measures. So if you do choose, so you could still deliver a football session, but it could be required to dribbling, obviously not going into games, so they could be dribbling the ball around, making sure again they're being reminded constantly that they need to be following those social distancing measures. Class sizes in the UK are currently up to 15 only. Again, not sure what else worldwide the class sizes are, but we only have 15. So make sure when you're getting your equipment or you're considering the amount of children that you're going to be teaching to. And again, make sure children have their own PE pencil case. So they're not picking up equipment, then going to put it in a pile and then getting that equipment 10 minutes later in their lesson. They're either using it for the whole duration of the lesson, or they have their own PE pencil case where they can go to and come back without interfering with anyone else's equipment. So like we said earlier on, no organised contact because safety is paramount. So no invasion games-based lessons. Make sure when you're delivering your sessions or planning your lessons, you make sure that there's no physical contact allowed. So if you're doing a gymnastics lesson, a forward roll, and they require support, that can't be allowed because you're going to physically then go into the children to help them. So make sure that it's based on, again, being safety, and discourage any physically challenging tasks, because if it involves you going in and helping, again, that's going to put staff at risk and children at risk, and it's not following the 2 metre guidelines. So this is a suggested lessons created by the PE, which is the Greek corner. So it is categorised into low factor activities, medium factor activities and high factor activities. So if you look at the low factor activities, these are most likely to be the most safest choice of activities that you should be delivering. So the most minimal contact and minimal equipment. So you've got your athletics track events where they could be doing their running, their hurdling, their sprinting. You've got your orienteering. On orienteering is probably a really good one to reinforce at this time of the year. I know that some people in their curriculum don't focus heavily on it, so maybe it's a good way to introduce them, get them physically active, as well as educating them on different locations within your schools. Football drills, hockey drills. You can try and encourage some walking and hiking, maybe. And then you can look at your maybe dance as well, because dance can be done without any equipment whatsoever. And then your medium factors is a little bit more equipment, but again, looking at having their own PE pencil case and their own equipment, so discus, shot, javelin, maybe looking at tennis. And then again, if they are playing tennis, encouraging them to use their racket to get the ball rather than picking the ball up. Any long jump activities, and then your high factor ones are ones you want to avoid realistically, because it does involve contact or the use of sharing equipment. It's the gymnastics, trampolining, your netball, basketball, unless they're job specific. So your changing routines, as I mentioned earlier on, you may have a day designated for your children to come in there for their PE. So when they come into school for their PE day, they're going to come in their PE kit ready, to avoid, again, changing areas. And you could maybe potentially have it every other day. So every other day in our school academy at the moment, especially for the key worker children, they come one day school uniform, one day PE kit, one day school uniform, one day PE kit, just to avoid that contamination, the hygiene of clothes coming in and out of the building, because I'm sure some children wear the same bottoms 2 days in a row. So it's just making sure that those routines are there and clean hygiene in the building. So hygiene during a PE lesson. So you need to have robust hygiene regimes during the lesson. So hand washing before and after. All equipment with a hard surface should be cleaned and sanitized. So just a suggestion is to use hard balls, not sponge balls, because any soft equipment is going to have to go in the washing machine, because if you just clean it with a wipe, it's not going to do the job. So you avoid any soft equipment such as sponge balls. Have tissues and wipes nearby throughout the duration of your lesson, and also make sure you have a hand sanitizer nearby. I'm sure a lot of staff at the moment, you have your own lanyards with a hand sanitizer on, so if it means taking one of those out with you, and if you need to use one for a child, let them have a bit of it. First aid as well. So first aid, you need to be carried for PE lessons, and they need to contain gloves and face masks and a disposable apron, because if that becomes necessary, then you're going to need to wear one. That's because when administrating first aid, you are going to be close contact with those children, so you need to protect yourself as well as them. So if you do need to deliver first aid, you need to make sure you have the PPE gear on. Drinks bottles as well. I have taught a lot of children that do share bottles PE because they forget to bring their own. That can't be happening at the moment due to the current situation. So drinks bottles are not to be shared. Whistles as well. Just because of the situation, as a teacher, I would suggest you avoid using whistles because of that droplets when you're blowing your whistle. Try and use verbal instructions, hand clapping, counting, to really encourage your children. Risk assessments is really important to review your risk assessments. So at this stage, you should have reviewed your risk assessments, whether or not it's in your whole school one or a PE specific one. They need to make sure that they encounter safe practice, and make sure that obviously you've got your designated areas for each year group if they're going out for PE, and you need to again make sure that if you're using equipment, that's stated what equipment can be used, what can't be used, and the risk for low, medium or high. This is a poster that I actually created for my school, which I'm happy to share if any other schools would like to put it up. So it's just a bit of a visual there for you to see for your children. So about changing, cleaning PE equipment, frequent hand washing, drinks bottles, the PE pencil case, and the social distancing rules. Just think it's really nice to maybe have that in an outdoor setting. So we have a cage outside, a basketball cage. We have that put up around the cage and attached to some trees, just again so that it's there to remind them during their physical education lesson they're still following those guidelines from the government, and that we are incorporating a PE pencil case idea for them to have during their lessons. I think that's it. Short and sweet.
Awesome. Abby, thank you so much. An artist and a head of PE, well done. If you were to make that poster available, that would be fantastic. We'll catch up with you after to see what the best way to kind of do that is. Again, I've really enjoyed being able to hear, three different angles to how people have kind of come out of the situation, and the level of detail of, things that you wouldn't naturally, not being a PE teacher, things that I wouldn't have ever thought of, that obviously, like quite obviously working with equipment you know, actually trying to maintain distance, using something hard other than soft, because they'd have to the pain in the backside of washing everything all the time. Again, thanks for going into that. Right, so Darren, over to you. I'm guessing you have got yourself ready, good man, so I'll just mute you, Abby. And I will just come and unmute yourself, Darren, because that would help. Oh, actually, you should be unmuted.
I should already be there.
Look at that, well done.
Thank you very much for having me. It's quite daunting coming to the end of such great presentations, and it was great to hear from a fellow physical educator talking about their ideas. And I love PE pencil case. I'm going to be taking that back to my department as soon as I'm finished. I'll be straight on the phone to my colleagues. So thank you very much for that. I'm Darren Leslie. I am a teacher of physical education. I also have a whole school responsibility for learning and teaching. And before this crisis, we spent the last 18 months trying to develop a virtual learning environment. And my head teacher was driving himself mad, desperate for us to get around to do it. But with the general busyness of the school day, we never got to it. But we set it up in a week. So we now have a fully functioning virtual learning environment for our children to engage with. But what I want to talk to you about today is the blended learning model. Blended learning is a term that's been bandied about Scottish education. I don't know if it's been bandied about any other ones, but it comes up all the time in our government documents just now, and the First Minister questions and the rhetoric from Mr. Swinney, our Education Minister. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how that's going to look for our school and a couple of recommendations, and I'm happy to take some questions on that. And before I do that, I am the founder of Becoming Educated, which is an initiative of my own to inform teachers, to challenge current thinking and to inspire action, just to keep getting better. And I work under the Dylan William idea of teachers shouldn't be trying to improve because they need to improve. We should be trying to improve because we can always get better and better and better, and that's what our children deserve. Oh, sorry. So first off, just a little bit idea of what is blended learning, because I've heard a lot of people talk about hybrid learning and blended learning, but blended learning is essentially a mix of using technology to combine in class and out of class. And there is some research out there that says that effective use of technology in and out of the classroom can actually enhance academic achievement. So it's important that we really put thought into how we can get that right. And I'll kind of give some strategies towards the end about how we're going to try and get that right. All of our guidance kind of comes from the government in Education Scotland, which is a government-owned body, which are our kind of Education Scotland encompasses our own inspectorate. So our version of Ofsted, it encompasses our kind of teaching resource. It is essentially everything you can have in education is all in one body in Scotland, and we have our SQA as our examination body, and it's all government centrally controlled. And I think that's a beauty of some of the schoolwork that we do in Scotland. And I'm going to share this document because it was put out by Graham Logan, who is essentially our head of education at the government. And it says a couple of things that to guide schools on the blended learning model. And I'm going to pick out a few key themes there. So we have 32 local authorities in Scotland, and our schools, all of our schools are what you would call maintained schools. And you either have normal state schools or you have Catholic schools, Roman Catholic schools, but they're all maintained and centrally located. We do have our fee-paying private schools, but most of them now deliver the Scottish qualifications. In the past, some of them did deliver the national curriculum, but now most of them do deliver the Scottish qualifications. And it's key that because we've got a small amount of local authorities, that there must be a level of consistency in approaches, because we have the Outer Hebrides and Shetlands and the islands and the West Coast. So although we're a small country, people are spread far and wide. So it's important that there is a level of consistency. But the government encouraged us to take into account our local context. For example, I work in a large secondary school, but most of our children are, I think in some areas you call them pupil premium children. I don't know what you call them in other areas, but we call it decile index of deprivation. And most of our children are in the lower side of that 1 to 3. So what we deliver would be quite different to what can be delivered in in a school that has kind of little to no deprivation, and there are many of them in Scotland. So we do have some flexibility, and it can't just be one size fits all, because we have Gaelic medium speakers and Gaelic medium schools, and we have Roman Catholic schools, and we have our normal state schools. So not everything can be the same. And obviously, if you live in a school, for example, if you are in the Anderson School in the Shetlands, some of those children come from far and wide. Some of them travel by boat to go to school, so they need different types of things for their blended learning. And it's important that anything that we deliver is consistent and easy to use. I think one of the things that we found, especially at the start, is that teachers were so desperate to work with the children and support with them that some of the things were too hard and there were too many. So we need to consider what the children actually need, and as Paul said, meet them where they are, regardless of kind of, I don't know what I'm trying to say there, but meet them where they are and give them the support that they need, and support their families. And I think that's a strength of the Scottish education system, and we really do a lot of inclusion, and we band about our words such as equity and excellence and delivering them both. And I think that's something that we really try and do, and it's something that we're going to try and do as we move into our blended learning model. So in my school, it's going to be different from other ones, and I'm going to caveat what I say with a little bit of what our First Minister said yesterday. So there's great debates in Scotland and Holyrood just now, and most schools up until now were looking at this pupils in 1 day a week, with the seniors in maybe 2 day a week, so our senior phase S4, S6, which would be equivalent to year 10 to year 12. And the First Minister said yesterday that she wants a 50-50 split. So this could look totally different in August, but it was confirmed by the head teacher today that this is what we're doing. And for example, the children will come in separate days, S1 on Monday, S5 and 6 on a Friday, and where it goes. And there'll be 12 children to a classroom. We've designed our one-way system. We've now got beautiful lines that go all the way through our school to share that one-way system. So, because even the teachers would forget. So there are a few occasions when you might be in the room next door and you need to travel all the way around rather than next door to keep that. And we're also going to have staggered lunches to minimise the amount of children that are in our dining area, and make sure that children are not kind of being put in kind of close proximities, because our hub is quite small, so it's important that we cater for that. So as I said, we've got a one-way system in place. We've got staggered lunch, but one thing that we've also going to do, which is kind of going to be a challenge for teachers, is that the teachers are going to move classrooms, not the pupils. So that you could have 3 periods before you get your lunch, or 4 periods before you get your lunch, which is a long time for children. So the teachers need to marry that up and get the children up and off their seats, but obviously within the confines of staying 2 meters apart. So that will be a challenge, but that minimises the amount of children that move through the day, so their learning can continue, and then the teachers can move seamlessly. So sometimes our school building is so large that some children can take about 8 to 10 minutes to get to classroom. So this might stamp this out for a little bit of time. So let's think about the learning, and we've spoken a lot about what effective teacher instruction is like for the last 2 years, and kind of unpicked key pieces of research and also our own practical experience to deliver a curriculum that is excellent and equitable. So if we've only got them one day a week and the rest we're doing remote learning, how are we going to do that? So in the classroom, when we've got small groups of 12, we can really manage meaningful classroom discussion, meaningful questioning, and really get deep with their learning. So we're going to introduce new learning. So if we have them whatever day of the week, that's when we're going to introduce new learning, new topics, new contexts. It's when we might do some kind of quick assessment, and it's just going to be our general day-to-day work as we would do. So having your do now activity, having some retrieval practice, having some questioning and discussion and experimentation within the confines of the rules that we've got just now in terms of health and safety. But when the children are at home, that's when we want them to retrieve that learning, kind of be able to set up tasks so that we can embed that learning into them, so that they're undergoing some sort of purposeful practice. So we're learning the new concept in the class, and like you would do with your guided practice in class, you're going to have to create and and shape some purposeful practice at home through the tasks that you design that the children can do quickly. And I'm going to talk about how it needs to be simple, short and often. Rather than giving children a piece of work that would last for a long time, we need to give them short 10, 15-minute tasks, but give it regularly so that they can pick it up, they can do it. If it's a Google form that they do quickly, or if it's a little bit of written work that they capture on their phone and send into you, or if they even do it on their phone and post that into you. So it's nice and quick and it's accessible for them to do. So you can give them meaningful feedback, and you can check and identify for any misconceptions. And it leads me on to Paul Kirshner's top 10 top tips. He delivered a wonderful seminar, I don't know how you got talk online for Research Ed, which is you can find on YouTube, and they're all free. The Research Ed YouTube clip, they've been doing them every day of the working weeks of lockdown, and they are marvelous. But Paul Kirshner framed it really well, and he said that when you're working at home, you need to do a couple of things, like stick to the essentials, refer to prior knowledge, provide detailed examples. You know, I do a lot of work under my visualizer when I'm in the class, and many of our teachers do, but it's at home when they're watching us do that on home. We can video ourselves doing that, and we can send it home, and then they can then do the work. They can do some purposeful practice thereafter that. It's important that we offer a lot of support during that practice. So what we've done for the past few while is we've said to the children, right, your teacher will be online in front of their computer during this time. Go and ask them questions, and our children, to their credit, have really engaged with that, and we're going to keep that in place as we move forward. So if we're teaching them on the Monday and we're introducing our new concepts, and we're having that class discussion, and we're having some guided practice, when they go through the rest of the week, that's when we do some more purposeful practice, but we can share more worked examples with them in short little 3 to 5 minute videos. And then we can offer them a lot of support and make sure that we can identify misconceptions and help them with their work. And I like the last point about spreading the work over time. A lot of the things we try and do in schools is fast, but this is an opportunity to kind of slow down our curriculum, especially for the younger years, and give them a little bit more challenge, but do over a longer time. Obviously quite different for our senior phase exams, because Mr. Swinney and Miss Sturgeon always tell us now that the exams will still go ahead, but we've had no guidance on how that will look. So it's important that we do keep up the learning for them. I want to talk very briefly on the benefits of Loom. We've, as a staff body, have engaged in creating Loom videos, sending it out to the children. It's where we've kind of introduced the material, where we've done some worked examples, and where we've set some questions and set some work. I think the beauty of this is that the stuff that we have done over the last 12 weeks is there forever. Children always come back to us and say, how do I study better? How do I revise better? How do I work better? We now have a wonderful resource where they can just watch their teacher back. They can watch it back, and we can access that. So we're going to store that. And throughout the year, we're going to box clever throughout the year. And that when we're delivering the home learning, we're going to make sure that it's made available to the children, and they can just look back at that at their revision. They want to clarify how to write an example answer. Well, we've got some worked examples for you. They want to clear up a misconception. Well, you've got your teacher guiding you through that on that Loom, so it's there for them on their revision. So just to summarise what I've said, there is no one size fits all. You know, every school has its different set of circumstances. Every school is unique in its context and how it works. So it's important that we take that into consideration. This is a real opportunity to develop a really valuable resource. Now, some universities are wonderful at that. You know, think about how the Open University work. They've been using a blended model of learning for a long time. This is now an opportunity for schools to do that. You know, children that maybe can't access the school all the time for whatever reason, they can then log on to this virtual learning environment. But obviously my wee caveat there is subject to change depending on what happens in the wider world, and obviously what happens at Holyrood. Everything I said today could be totally different by the time I'm back in my classroom on the 10th of August. Thank you very much for listening. If you want to know more, I am at DN Leslie on Twitter. I'm happy to engage and connect with anyone who wants to engage. My website is becomingeducated.co.uk. I blog there regularly. mainly about teaching and learning, pedagogy, assessment, and and the wider world of education. I've got my podcast is 21 episodes so far. Richard Gerver was released this week. My conversation with him on education as a whole. You can find that on Apple or Spotify by just typing in Becoming Educated. Thanks so much for listening.
Darren, thank you so much. Again, it's been really interesting to hear another perspective of how not just the schools, but how different governments are coming at this challenge. And again, I'm sure we're going to be coming back to you in the not too distant future to see if you're up for some collaborating on creating some content together. Because again, really well kind of delivered and shared a lot of those messages. I'm actually going to kick off the Q&A. We've got a couple lined up here. I'm going to again kick off the Q&A with a couple from myself actually. And the first one is a question to all 4 of the speakers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go backwards. So Darren, if you want to answer this first, then just to make things super complicated. So we'll go to Darren first, then we'll go to Abby, then Malin, then Paul. And the question is, you've just touched on Loom being really effective. What would you consider is the kind of the technology, your go-to technology now as a school that you think, do you know what, because of all the mayhem of the past however many months, actually stumbling across this platform, this extra functionality, we're going to embed that in the future of how we kind of go about teaching in a school?
For me, this came at a great time. I've been advocating Google Apps for education for a long, long time. In my previous school, I was pivotal in getting that into the whole local authority in Perth and Kinross, and we now have it in our school. We now have every child on Google. And what's beautiful about that is that the children can use that as a class forum. I blogged about it in my blog about how I want to bring back my class forum. This idea that it's owned by the children and they can use it as a safe space to talk about their learning, and their learning goes beyond the 4 walls of the classroom. And that's key, because you can also have it on their phone or their iPads or their Androids or whatever, and they can do it. I write regularly about some beautiful examples from a previous school when children would walk up to me at lunchtime and show me their homework that they've been just doing on a Google Doc, and I could give them real-time feedback there while I'm queuing for my own lunch. So I think that's them taking responsibility and becoming owners of their learning. I mean, for me, I think using that as a platform to engage the children, and especially if we're only going to see them once a week, having that as a space where they can ask us questions, they can speak to us, they can speak to each other. The EEF found that peer-to-peer interaction is a huge driver in the success of children with online learning. So it's an opportunity for them to share. This is what I've read. I mean, some of the children I've got are currently discussing this afternoon on who's most likely to win the football matches tonight. So it's a great place for them to do that and do that safely. And
did you find that it was easy for them to pick up? Was there a kind of an up curve in learning? Do you find it was adopted fairly well?
Yes, because so Scotland has its own kind of, I don't even know what it's called, intranet called Glow. So every child and teacher has an email and access to Glow, and on there they just need to click on a tile and it takes them straight to Google Classroom. We have so many resources on Glow that it's just a brilliant resource, and it's all in there. It's safe, as I said, and they just click on the tile and it's there. They can open it on their phone, their laptops, their iPads, anywhere.
And is that moderated by somebody in the local authority?
Glow is just our national service, so I think Education Scotland have overall control of it.
Amazing, thanks so much. And over to you, Abby. What sort of tech have you stumbled across that it might become a can't live without solution? Sorry, Abby, my bad. How about I ask you again, and this time I'll try and turn your mic on.
I've done it now.
Perfect.
Right. So the kinds of tech, I know that we at the moment, in terms of online platforms, we're using Seesaw, not sure who else is using Seesaw. And we, as well as obviously delivering PE within school, we're also uploading PE to there, and teachers are obviously uploading their English, maths, reading. And we've kind of come across it as a good homework platform for next year. So I think the idea is to keep that going, to upload homework in the long run. So I think it's just easier for teachers to access that, and also we can set PE as well, as so that children can start seeing how important that is alongside other learning. So trying to really reinforce that curriculum. So yeah, so when they have their homework, rather than children coming in saying, oh, I've lost my piece of work or my homework book, it's all online for them to access. And then those children that unfortunately don't have access to the internet will obviously have their normal paper copies. But yeah, so we're obviously Seesaw can be accessed on phones, tablets, normal laptops, so it's quite accessible from different devices.
And that will be, again, you'll be using that predominantly with the kind of setting homework, having it in a centralized place moving forward.
Yeah, it's worked really well with the children going on at the moment. At the start, it took some time to get children going on because obviously it was different for the home learning. But yeah, that's kind of worked really well. It's really interactive, so children can choose how they respond. They can obviously use a drawing tool, they can text respond, so it's quite creative, and children can respond to what they think's best for them, best suits for them.
Awesome. So Malin, question to you also is, what kind of technology have you guys, kind of been forced into using, but now you're actually quite happy with it and look to continue in the future? Sorry, again, I should have learned that last time. I need to unmute.
Okay.
Go for it.
We're quite used to using different digital solutions at our school, and we've been doing it for a long time. So it's nothing new. We use Google Classroom on an everyday basis, and the students are used to it. So I think this has been Google. Using Zoom or Google Meet, that's been new for us, for all of us, and some have used it. Otherwise, it wasn't that strange for our pupils. I think they're more used to working on the computer than working with a pen and a paper.
Really? Awesome. Okay, again, Paul, over to you. If you
Okay, so we were quite fortunate, and then at the start of this year, we bought a Chromebook for all of our Year 12s. So we gave them all a Chromebook, and then we had a bit of a discussion. We had a group of staff, a group of sixth form staff who decided to be the trailblazers here, and they considered the best way to do that. And we went for, it was a toss-up between Google Classrooms and Microsoft Teams. We went for Teams, but there wasn't a lot in it. And what we found, I think the balance, the reason we came down with Teams was because of the way that we could share documents, and also the way that we could use that not just for students but also for groups of staff, and we could set different groups up. So it was really flexible from that point of view. So we're using Teams. We were already starting to use that, and we've used that much more for some of the remote learning and some of the online sessions and some of our meetings as well. It feels like it's certainly in terms of safeguarding, it gives us protection that maybe Zoom wouldn't do, and so that's really beneficial. The most important thing for us is not, because I think I wouldn't say Teams is any, has a particular crucial advantage over some of the other platforms we looked at. The most important thing is getting students access, and we are now committed, I think, to making sure that all of our students have, and we probably will go for Chromebooks because we've started there. We got our 11 across the whole trust from the government for Year 10, which won't make much of a dent in it. But I mean, we calculate it'll cost us about £250,000 if we were to buy everyone a Chromebook. If there's any generous millionaires on the call and they want to kind of help out, then please get in touch. But what we will probably do is ask parents to try and arrange some kind of lease arrangements so that people who can afford it will be able to do it, and we will then provide it for some of our more less advantaged pupils. But it will take, I would estimate, 18 months for us to get to that point. So we use Teams. It works really well, but I've heard other good things about other platforms as well. I think the key to us is not the software, it's the hardware, really, and making sure that all students have that.
And on continuing with the theme of hardware, how have you found the let's say, how can I word this properly? the generation that didn't grow up with a mobile phone or a smartphone, how have they approached the use of technology? Has it been a smooth transition, or have you encountered any bumps and found any ways around it?
Well, I think the thing is, when it comes down to it, it's not that the stuff that we're using is not that it's not that tricky really. When I think there's kind of fear about this. So when we use Zoom for some of the like for the parents forums and everything, because I think if you're bringing people in from outside the organisation, it's a really easy to use platform. We know that staff have lots of WhatsApp groups and so on. So I think there have been some who kind of have balked a little bit at first, but I think that's, support them. Everyone has had to get involved with that. Now, when it comes to creating lessons and so we haven't used Loom so much, but we have a lot of people we did some training on using PowerPoint and kind of animations in using video within PowerPoint and so on, and commentaries in PowerPoint. And some have found that a bit trickier, which I think is probably an attitudinal problem, because it's really not that tricky. We know that we have to have CPD, really effective CPD, for quite a considerable period of time. And we need to kind of, do, and in a secondary structure, departments are really good for doing that. So we'll have strong department leads where they can get support from each other and they plan together.
And would you look at having would there be like a champion, like an IT or a tech champion that people can go to?
We do that, yeah. I mean, that's basically what we had with the year 12s. We've got teachers, and actually it was departments who said, so kind of business and economics, they were really particularly keen on this, but so English as well. And I think, so we have some, and we have what we call research and inquiry groups, and they do things and they post things for the staff and feedback at when we have sort of teaching and learning meetings. So we have people who do that. It still doesn't, there are still people who instinctively kind of recoil from this, but as I say, on a simple level, it's really not that tricky when you get over that first hurdle.
Fantastic. Thank you, Paul. So we'll jump into some other questions. I'm going to start with Jared, as he got in there first. Unfortunately, his mic is under the weather, so I'm going to ask a question on his behalf. Question is, I know that there are some primary schools that are worried about all the missed math and English. How can we effectively get a balance of curriculum when we know there is a lot of missed learning from school closures? Darren, do you want to have a go at this one?
Yes, happy to. One thing I'd like to mention is that John Hattie's meta-analysis, I was on a webinar with him last week, and he's done some studies in New Zealand after the earthquake in Christchurch and after Hurricane Katrina was somewhere, and they found that children missed up to 12 weeks of learning, but their actual educational outcomes didn't improve, and in some cases were actually better. So I spoke to my staff today about how we're maybe panicking a bit too much about when we talk about missed learning, because in the grand scheme of an educational career, it's not that long. And given what Hattie says, we are prioritising all our subjects in our school. Obviously English and maths. In Scotland, we have what's called responsibility for all. So every staff is responsible for teaching literacy, numeracy, and health and well-being. And health and well-being is a big can of worms once you get behind it. But every teacher is responsible for reading and writing and speaking, because we do that in every classroom, and we do a lot. We call it our active literacy program, and we do a lot to upskill and support teachers to make sure that they are demanding excellence, as Ron Berger would say, from the children. So we are prioritising that. I know that some of our primary schools are really struggling and battling with what they're going to do, and they are prioritising your English, maths and science. But what we are looking at is how do our history teachers support the primary teachers, deliver some history, and can the high school teachers do some of that? If it is online, can they tailor some programs to help? Can our geography teachers do the same? And and can our music teachers help out? So, but because it's all kind of controlled by the local authority, we are prioritising a lot, and we do have our responsibilities for all, which is really hammered home to the teachers. So in terms of developing the English and maths and science, that tends to happen throughout our curriculum anyway.
Awesome. We will thank you for that. We'll move on to the next question, which was from Bernard at St. George's. I'm not entirely sure if he's still with us, however, so I will go. Bernie, if you are still online, just drop me a message. If not, I will fire ahead on your behalf. So this was a question for Malin. And it goes along the lines of, Malin, we have had a lack of consensus in the UK between the teaching unions, governments and regional management, including our councils and academies. This has led to uncertainty, confusion and a lack of confidence in some of our families. What lessons do you think that we could learn from Sweden? Just a small question for you, Malin.
Yeah, thank you. No, but it's not up to the school to decide that much. We need to listen to the government, and I think that we do trust them a lot in Sweden.
So have parents, has there been a concern? Has there been any overt disagreement with the way things have panned out? Like, have you had parents complain? Has there been fears amongst the community?
Not that much of complaints that I've heard, but fear, yes. And I think mostly among the parents who come from different countries. Parents.
Okay.
Maybe Swedes are a bit naive people. We haven't had any natural disasters, wars for a very, very long time. So we're in a state where we think that nothing's going to happen to us. But people who come from places where there's been wars, for example, they are afraid because they know that things can happen and it's more dangerous. So they're not complaining, but I know that they are afraid. Yes. But we listen to them, we respect them, and we make sure that they get their education anyway.
Fantastic. And what about yourselves, the teachers on the front line? Is there a general consensus that the government made the right decision? Yes, as teachers we feel confident, we feel safe, and we feel that you were playing a massive role in the country's management of actually the crisis. Do you, again, from a teacher's point of view, do you guys feel secure?
Myself, yes, but I know some of my colleagues, they really wanted us to close down the school too. So we don't agree, all of us. And like I said, if you are in a risk group, you are able to stay home. You don't have to come to work. So you can stay home and teach from home if you are afraid and if you are in a risk group or
Awesome. Thank you so much. I will now hand the mic over to Russell. I've spotted that you've been really active in the group chats. Thank you for that one. I'm just going to unmute you. If I could do that myself. There we are.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So the school that I was part of when the pandemic first hit moved really slowly on developing online platforms. In the maths department, we put everyone on Maths Watch, which was an unusual platform. I was really excited to help them look at potential ways we could develop innovative, interactive online systems for learning. I was wondering if anyone here has had success in those areas with their schools and would share some of the more interesting and innovative online learning platforms that they're using.
Yourself, Russell, do you want to direct that at anybody in particular, or shall I?
I'd love to start with Paul, only because I wrote his name down when I wrote the question, because he talked about it first.
Perfect, thanks very much. Paul, over to you.
Okay, well, I don't have any particularly that focused on maths, but partly because you know, our maths team, I'm not sure because I haven't worked directly there. We've used something called sensory learning, which we now have, which is a really interesting. It's a platform that does some kind of it allows students to work in lots of different areas, lots of different subjects, and gives them some feedback. It's got lots of quizzes, but and activities, and does some analysis as well. And what's good about that is that it informs the teacher. So I think that, you know, it'd be reluctant to say just use it, you know, do something. This does it for you. But what it does is it does some kind of analysis of, it takes the threshold concepts in particular, identifies those, does some kind of analysis of where there's gaps. You can look at that for individual students or as groups as well, and you can set the learning or set the areas of learning. There's lots of activities there. So that's something called sensory learning. I mean, I'm sure you can Google it. And we've also, for our sixth forms, we've used similar things before we came into this, things like Seneca and Seneca Learning and so on. So we've always tried to have as much of that. Before we did this, what we were looking at was things that students can access on phones or mobile devices rather than laptops and computers, because that's what they have and that's what they're most likely to do. And then through our work with Year 12s, we've looked at a bit more. What we've tried to say to teachers is don't try and certainly put some things together, particularly lessons, and some of the reasons Darren was saying, but don't try and invent an online platform for yourself, because you know, that's you will spend a lot of time doing something for not a great deal of benefit. And we know there are things out there. I will come back and I'll kind of ask that question specifically of our maths department, Russell, and post here if I can get a specific answer for you as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Russell. Thank you, Paul. I would love to now go over to Helen Pitt. Would you like to ask? Let me just you are muted. Yeah, so Helen, fire away with your question.
Yeah, hi. We're from Monday, if we do open, and the R rating where we are in the Northwest at the moment was above 1 2 weeks ago. So we'd prepared to welcome the reception back on the Monday and had to, on the Friday at 5 o'clock, change all our plans and close. We now know that since that, in the last 2 weeks, our critical workers have almost filled our school, and reception are due in on Monday, which we're pretty sure we're going to open the school. That means our school will be full, which means we've got 300 children learning at home who can't come in because we're full of critical workers and reception. We won't be allowed, the year ones, there's no room for year ones, there's no room for year sixes either. But what we are now aware of is that we've lost impetus with the home learning. We've sent videos, we have weekly phone calls, and we know from the parents that the children are very reluctant. They're tired now. And I wanted to ask Paul, we are currently this morning starting to work on adapting what our home learning looks like. We've used, we've adapted throughout this process, but we now need to look at engagement over and engaging with the curriculum to prepare them for September. Even though we don't know what we're looking at in September, we're trying to make an assumption that everyone will be back, even though we're not sure, but we need to prepare for the next year group. So I wondered, Paul, what would you recommend we focus on in these last 4.5 weeks to help the parents and children, not just the children, the parents engage with the home learning?
Good question.
And it's one that lots of us are thinking about at the moment. I mean, it's really interesting, and from an English perspective, I'm sure there are others, when we listen to Malin talking about the relationship between schools and government and reflecting on how different it is here, and that they have, you know, kind of faith in the government to make the right decision. I think I've got faith in the government. They've made so many decisions that the law of averages says that some of them must be the right decision. But we are, at the moment, we've got, first of all, we have to have a different approach depending on the year group. So, and I know it'll be different in primary, but the same things will apply. We've got some children who are going to come into us for the first time, and we're really focusing on those year sixes, trying to do some, so we're doing virtual transition days for those year sixes to get them to, so that they can understand what it's going to be like when we come in. Because what I think logic would say, let's have a gradual introduction in September. But actually, I think that the way we present that we have to be really careful, because people have missed so much school. I think if we then stagger that in September, then I think people would actually not react well to that. My biggest concern are the 7s, 8s and 9s. So in our primary schools, the 2s, 3s, 4s and 5s, the ones who really we haven't done very much, and we've had the same experience. They've tailed off now. They've a lot of enthusiasm, but it's very samey. It's kind of there's parents are losing the energy, and also they're now going back to work in lots of cases, and so they're not able to. We're getting the sense that they're not all getting up, doing their Joe Wicks, and then sitting down for 3 hours in front of the laptop. So I think we are now. That's what I've said before. We just have to recognise this is not ideal. This is not a good model of learning that we have at the moment. We can't. I mean, the primary programme, when the idea that you would have everyone back in was clearly nonsense. Clearly couldn't be delivered, and so just waiting for that to be confirmed. So we have to be ready. But then I think the skill will be in planning for other eventualities and thinking. And we've said the full range of things. Either they will be back in completely as they were, and with classes of 30. Now, even if that happens, I think we can assume that attendance will be lower, and that there's going to be some interruptions in learning, certainly as we go into the winter. There could be students and groups who are sending home for periods of time, and also that it will take some of that loss and that loss of engagement will be difficult to overcome. So we're assuming that there will be that things will look a bit different. And so what we need to do is to plan the curriculum, and it's a lot of work for teachers, but they need to go back to their planning and say, this is what we can deliver in school, and this is what we can deliver at home. And I think the crucial thing is, what we would have loved to have done this term, if we were in charge of planning, and it's the thing that I tweet about almost every day, if you just trust us to make the right decisions, and we will make the right decisions. If we were in charge of planning, we would have brought every year group in for 1 day a week through this term, and in that day we'd tried to make sure that the other 4 days were effective, that we had a chance to reflect on the learning they did, give them some individual support, get them motivated, because we all know, if eventually that will tail off. I mean, they're children, and they won't maintain that motivation. If we could have brought them in once a week and supported that, then that would have been effective. So we have to assume from September some of that time will be spent at home. And if it isn't, then that's that will be a good thing, and we won't have lost anything from that. But we need to focus on what are the things that have to be done in school, face to face with a teacher, giving that feedback. So key threshold concepts, for example, that need to be done, and you need to get that instant feedback. But then the practice. I mean, Darren described it exactly right. The kind of retrieval practice, the test, some of those. Kind of low stakes testing and so on that you can do at home, and feedback, then we can interact with them there. So it's a real challenge, because it's a total reimagining of the curriculum. On the other hand, though, when we do that, good things come from that. Re-examining and looking at the curriculum again means that we will probably find some better ways of doing things. But I think we won't be delivering summer schools, because teachers will be working all summer anyway. I'll be telling them to, but I know teachers, and that's what they'll be doing anyway. They'll be planning also.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Helen and Paul. Thank you for your answer. Do we have any more questions from you guys? Again, it has been an absolute pleasure to welcome you all onto the first call, coming up to our 2-hour mark. At this present moment in time, I was a bit concerned when we were putting this together that 2 hours was going to drag and it's going to be difficult to get there, but it's been a really interactive and hopefully I find you guys have found it really beneficial to hear from a couple of different angles. Do have a final question from Russell again. And it's a good one to end up with, I think. So again, in fact, Russell, I'll go back to you. You can ask the question yourself. Yay. So if you, good luck.
Hi, so I have today and yesterday, I have actually penned a rather sort of emotive letter to Gavin Williamson, basically demanding that on top of all that we're seeing in this current crisis, that we must abandon our relentless pursuit of test results. The crisis has shown us that there is so much more to teaching and so many more things that we need to focus on. A commenter in the chat earlier was saying that parents are panicking because their children are missing key learning, which we know from different rates of development for children that's not how it works. How do we think that over the next few years we will see education develop and evolve in response to the changes this pandemic has brought?
Cool. So again, I think this will be a nice question to get a final statement from our 4 speakers. So we're going to reverse order again to give Paul a minute. So Darren, do you want to kick us off? Overarching changes over the potentially next 5 years?
Absolutely, that's a great question, Russell, and it's something that a few of my colleagues have written about in the Scottish version of the TES magazine. We get a different version of TES. And I think what it's shown that we have one exam body in SQA, and we're the same. We have what we call the 2-term dash, where we just kind of drive children and take them kicking and screaming to the end of our nationals, which is the same as GCSE, and our hires, which are the same as A level. And we've shown that that teachers, we can resource, we can evidence, and we can assess the children for that. And I think hopefully we'll see some changes in how the children are assessed, kind of maybe still having that one-day exam, but also supplementing it with much more of the work that they do throughout the year. Because what is the point in spending 8 months in a classroom doing all that work when it comes down to 2 hours? You know, I think it's shown that. And I think the beauty of physical education in Scotland, we reward the children for the work they do throughout the year, and that is nearly 70% of their overall grade, which takes the stress off the exam. And you should speak to the children before it comes to that exam, and they're just so relaxed. They're so kind of comfortable with where they are in their learning because they know exactly where they are, because we've worked with them and we've evidenced that throughout the year, and then it just takes that stress away. So hopefully I'd like to see that change and kind of take away that 2-term dash and have it spread over a longer time. I think that the way that schooling works, and I think there's been a lot of chat in Scotland for a long time. We changed our curriculum in the early 2000s to our curriculum for excellence, and it was supposed to herald a big change in curriculum, and that's not been the case. So hopefully it gives us another review of defining what we actually want the Scottish children to, how we want them to be represented in the world, and how we want them to go about the world. And more emphasis will be on kind of the kind of, what do you call it? I'm trying to remember the UNESCO 4 pillars when we talk about the whole child in learning. And I hope that we do more of that rather than emphasising the academic subjects. We go for a whole host of work, because there's obviously space for everyone. I mean, people can drive the academic subjects and get their English, maths and science and go off and be doctors, but that's the minority of Scottish children. What about celebrating the other people that do work in the creative arts, and they want to go and work as a history professor or work in an art gallery? We need to drive that and have that kind of holistic approach. If we're going to say that our 3 main drivers are literacy, numeracy and health and well-being, we need to prioritise the health and well-being of our children, because they are the future of our nation.
Awesome, thanks so much, Darren. Then we'll go over to Abby.
I've had a bit of a think about this one. Bit difficult, I think, in terms of obviously the physical education side, but I am like looking in a more education way. I do think that maybe there might be a reduced learning for lunch times and break times maybe in the future, to try and encourage like children to catch up on their learning that they may have missed. So that's all I can really consider, maybe them implementing in schools, so reducing lunch times to maybe 40 minutes rather than an hour, to make sure that they've got that extra 20 minutes maybe of well-being, or maybe looking over other additional subjects that they need to look at. That would maybe be my suggestion, because it's quite a lot of learning, a lot of time that they've missed. So maybe
What do you think the reaction would be to extending the school day to fit in more coverage of maybe, you know, health and well-being?
I think it'd be. I think it works really well. It'd be really well to work for the children. I think that they'll understand. I think that as long as it's reinforced to them the importance of their education, and then obviously the future with them, I think that they'll respond really well to it. And again, going over well-being for them, again, it'll be good for them. So that's my thought.
Awesome, thank you, Abby. Marlon, what do you think? The perspective of the next 5 years, what do you see coming up? If you could unmute.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's been different here, so it's not the same situation, but something that we have noticed and that we can learn from and is that we have children who stay at home from school because they don't manage to get to school due to mental health, anxiety and things like that. And they have actually liked this, and we have been able to reach them in a way that we haven't before. So that will be different, I hope.
That's an angle that I hadn't thought about before, that, you know, we've been speaking about the differences within learning styles and differences within children's backgrounds and their attitudes and personalities. Like, actually remote learning and working would suit a portion of those people. And there might be some really constructive lessons that can be taken to kind of cater a little bit more for that segment, which, you know, might be able to be implemented moving forward. So thank you for that perspective. Paul, we started with you, sir. Do you want to bring us on home?
Okay, so I think that first of all, this period is going to make changes in the way we operate as a society, and I think, you know, when the history of this period is written, there will be pre-2020 and COVID and post-2020 and COVID. So this is going to have big changes, and we will, as schools, we'll reflect that. So we'll be part of that bigger change. And I have my kind of hopes and fears about that. But since this is, you know, I'm an optimistic person by nature, and since this is sort of bringing the end, I'll concentrate on the hopes really. And I think I'm hoping there are some really important positive things that will come in our society that will affect schools about this. In particular, the fact that we will change the way that we see value. And we've seen that already, and that there are certain kind of jobs and positions in society that in the past, if you'd have talked to our students about being a care worker or being a supermarket shelf stacker or whatever it might be, then you would have been putting that as almost a cautionary tale. If you don't work hard enough, that's where you'll end up. And now I think that we're starting to, you know, we're really understanding that the value of these things, and that we don't just measure the value of someone in how much they earn, and status has a different aspect. And once we start doing that, once we start thinking from that point of view, other things flow from that. And one of the things that I think has been a damaging thing in our education system, and my main interest in terms of research and is around accountability and the impact of accountability, is the fact that we see education as a competition, and that's a competition between students, and it's a competition between schools, and from a trust point of view, it isn't half a competition between trusts. And actually, if we can abandon that as an underlying concept, then the possibilities in terms of learning suddenly start to flow, because we don't see, it's not about finishing the race ahead of the person next to you. It's about doing the things that really you can do well and that you can make a contribution. So that's my optimistic view, that we surf this change in society, and that gives us real opportunities to change things for our students. Awesome.
Thank you so much, Paul. Again, you know, that we echo that sentiment. Everything that, you know, we as a team have been doing is really around partnerships and the value of, and, you know, it's a privilege again to have all of you guys with us this afternoon. I know, you know, you guys are dialing in from all over the planet. We've had a couple of people who've had to drop out because it's like 12:30 in the evening, or they've got to go and teach a class somewhere. So again, if you guys are catching us on the recording, thank you so much for your participation. What I will do is, for those of you that aren't currently signed up as ambassadors on the website, I would just drop the link into the chat there. I would advise it, if you enjoyed your time this afternoon, we will be emailing out the recording to those who registered. You will also need to be an ambassador to get the invite for the next one. The theme for the next call is a TBC. And I'm really keen, if you guys have got any feedback that you want to share with us, then please by all means get in touch, and we will if we get a theme that is a lot of you are requesting, then we'll definitely go out. And the way I envisage it kind of developing in the future is that once we decide what the topic is, we'll go out with 4 slots, and then we'll again go out to all the ambassadors first, and ask, does anybody have any thoughts that they'd like to share. What I'd like to start doing also is I'd like to start inviting other kind of individuals in to kind of be kind of guest speakers that might not traditionally fit within a GSA member or ambassador. So if you guys have got suggestions or requests on that behalf as well, we're more than happy to go and champion that for you. So yeah, I hope you've all had an enjoyable and informative couple of hours. It's been, we've really enjoyed it. Again, thank you so much. And we are just about to hit our mark on the dot. So again, thank you so much. Enjoy your evenings, your afternoons, your mornings, wherever you are, and we'll catch you on the next call. Thanks again.